This week on Quality Digest Live, improving process improvement.
Plus, what can software development teach us about improving clinical practice? We'll find out when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 22nd, 2016. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richman. Well, we're going to kick off the show this week with some news from ANSI, the American National Standards Institute. ANSI recently released a revised version of the United States Standards Strategy, better known as the USSS. This document, which is available online in a digital format, was originally published in 2000 and has been updated every 5 years. It was updated in December 2005, in December 2010, and it was again updated just last month on December, I think it was December 2nd. The ANSI members voted to approve it. The document describes the principles and tactics that guide how the United States develops standards and participates in the international process of creating standards. This new version reflects current national priorities and industry growth areas, including the advancements in innovations such as smart cities, the Internet of Things, cybersecurity, and the continuing shift to an economy based primarily on services. This all dovetails nicely with another news item just posted last week on the ANSI website, in which the Institute discussed President Obama's final State of the Union message. Now, many of the president's calls to action, such as the need for sophisticated protections against terrorism, economic retooling and worker retraining, and green energy solutions, directly correspond to ANSI's mission as reflected in the USSS. Now, it makes sense, right? I mean, the USSS is a broad statement, dovetails really with what Obama's saying as well. There are broad strategic imperatives for the United States in the areas of technology and business and worker development, all these very important things for the economy and for the security of the United States.
And obviously ANSI's role is standards related to those things.
Developing that, to kind of follow the lead that's set by the government in terms of establishing standards to do these things that are important to the people of the United States. The USSS actually details 12 important initiatives that reflect the changing nature of the U.S. standards system and the industries that it's meant to support. The specific initiatives include things like strengthening participation by government in the development and use of voluntary consensus standards through public-private partnerships, continuing to address environmental, health, and safety concerns in the development of voluntary standards, working to prevent standards and their application from becoming technical trade barriers to U.S. products and services, and establishing standards education as a priority within the U.S. private, public, and academic sectors. All those are good things. And again, they dovetail really nicely when you hear about those with what Obama's State of the Union message is, and then the broader concern of why we have standards. Why do you have standards, and why is the government interested in standards? And it's to make work more efficient, to protect people, to make things work better, right? That's really why we have standards. So for more information, be sure to check out the ANSI website at www.ansi.org.
All right. Robots.
Let's get to robots.
About robots. I love robots, especially little tiny robots.
That's right.
Which is what we're talking about. The Georgia Institute of Technology is building a new lab that will allow roboticists from around the country to conduct robotics experiments remotely. Researchers from other universities, as well as, let's say, middle and high school students, will be able to schedule experiments at the lab. They'll upload their own programming code, watch the robots in real time via streamed video feeds, and by the way, other people can watch those video feeds as well, and then receive scientific data demonstrating the results of those experiments. So it's going to be called the Robotarium.
That's awesome.
Big surprise. And it is expected to house up to 100 ground and aerial swarm bots. So what we're talking about here are little tiny robots. I think we've got a picture of one there. These are, couple inches, maybe a couple inches or an inch in square or diameter and so forth. And swarm bots they're kind of an interesting area of study, and as the name implies, it is the study of how to get hundreds or maybe even thousands of robots to interact with each other and the environment to achieve a particular result. And they use relatively simple individual rules to produce a large set of complex, what we call swarm behaviors. The model in many ways is, let's say, like insects. So the idea is that a lot of these robots the idea is that they're inexpensive. They're small and inexpensive. And because you use a lot of them, it's also scalable. You know, if you need 100 bots, you use 100 bots. If you need 1,000, you use 1,000. You need 10,000, you use 10,000. And so some of the applications, I mean, they throw out a couple of ideas in there, but you might think rescue operations. So imagine, let's say, a mine cave-in, and you can't get a human being down just yet. Or maybe all you have room to do currently is maybe send down a camera. Well, instead, you could send down 100 bots or 1,000 bots. Each of them with little cameras, little sensors, and they could, if you could get them down there, they could roam around, you know, the open space wherever there is down there, kind of mapping out the territory, maybe looking to see if anybody's alive, measuring the temperature, humidity, toxicity of the air, all sorts of things like that, and send it back up. So this is just one application. They've got a lot of ideas for how these things could be used, but there's kind of two sides to the problem of swarm bots. First is the hardware, obviously, and the second is the software. And the software is kind of the easy part because it can be developed anywhere. I mean, think of when IBM first came out with the personal computer and made all the software, you know, open source, right? So anybody in their garage could go out there and start developing software for the hardware. So that's kind of the same idea here, but the hardware is the difficult part. You need a place to test it, and that's kind of another story. And that's the purpose of this lab, because a multi-robot lab really is a little too expensive for most roboticists and even budding roboticists. So you need a place to improve access to the technology. And that's really what this is all about. It provides a place where experimenters can upload their software and then test it. So kind of fun.
Yeah, but you know, the idea of swarm bots, I mean, it's, you know, we talk about this all the time. I mean, it's like out of science fiction into reality, and so quickly, right? I mean, this idea that you could have this swarm of bots, I mean, it's kind of scary in a sense, but you know, the controls that are in place and the way that these are going to be used, it makes so much sense. You know, you talk about a mine cave, and I mean, that's just a perfect example.
They talked another one about looking at measuring smoke plumes, and I think an experiment may have already been done with this, where you send up a jillion aerial swarm bots, and they're all basically their goal is to map, let's say, a smoke plume, maybe to get to the size of it, or I don't know, maybe there's sensors in them, they can fly through it and feedback, you know, what kind of chemicals are in it, that sort of thing. I don't know, but that's the idea. Is you can scale these up and down to fit the task, and they're relatively inexpensive, and they're simple. And obviously, if one breaks or you lose a bunch, you don't really care. That's the idea of a swarm, is you don't care if you lose one bot. Basically, if you can collect enough information from the swarm, then you've accomplished your job. You know, so it's fun. It's fun stuff.
That's crazy stuff, but it's very interesting. And Dirk, I know you like keeping your eye on this kind of stuff. So
robots and lasers,
lasers, all that micro
laser robots.
So we'll keep an eye on that going forward. All right, thanks, Dirk. All right, well, yesterday in Quality Digest Daily, we ran an article from a new contributor by the name of, and I want to get this right, Niranjan Dehodar, I believe is how we pronounce that. The piece is titled Process Improvement on Process Improvement. And the piece casts a discerning eye on whether or not those who help to improve organizations, and in this case he's talking about consultants who do things like Lean and Six Sigma, or Lean Six Sigma, how those consultants can actually walk their talk. What he's trying to discover is how good process improvement professionals are at measuring and improving their own processes, right? That's a really good question. How good are we at doing that? Well, Deodar approaches the question very much from an engineer's perspective. He's an engineer, I believe. I think he is. Looking at the component parts of what makes a successful continuous improvement effort. More importantly, he itemizes the dimensions upon which a success or failure of a given project, and a given professional for that matter, might be measured. These are things like effectiveness, efficiency, speed to market, reusability, sustainability, and variation. So he looks at this, pulls it apart with all these different dimensions, and begins to measure it and say, well, what would be the measurement for effectiveness, for efficiency, for speed to market?
So basically he's applying kind of the same rules that he would apply on some manufacturing process. He's applying it to the process improvement process.
Yes.
Okay.
So he's asking, are we doing what we're recommending that other people
Right.
do?
Okay.
An interesting perspective. And the article really presents a lot of good, solid solutions for how to measure and how to, improve using these kind of dimensions. And there's a lot of practical ideas presented here. And every one of those dimensions has some really interesting practical ideas that maybe you haven't thought of, and maybe people that are reading this haven't thought of, and into what you could do and maybe should do to improve your own process of process improvement. Many of you in our audience are engineers of one kind or another, so you're definitely going to appreciate the logic and the force of this very technical argument. What he's saying here makes a lot of sense. It's very logical. Well, what Deodar doesn't get to in this first piece, and by the way, this is the first in what's planned to be a series of articles on this very topic. What he doesn't really get to is exactly why tools like this aren't used as frequently as they probably should be. And I have some ideas about this. And of course, I want to say these are my own rambling notions. They're not from an engineer.
Mike's deep thoughts.
And they're not in any way reflected in Deodar's very measured approach. So please, Mr. Deodar, don't take offense. I thought about this from the perspective of leadership. And I thought about it from the perspective tell people what you can and should do. Give advice, be an expert, be a leader. And boy, what a surprise. I thought about the presidential election year. It made me think about politicians, and politicians, politicians are like that, I think. I see a lot of links there. They're people, again, they're experts, supposedly, in leadership and in governing, and they should be telling people what they themselves do. But do they practice what they preach all the time?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, all the time, right?
Yeah,
well,
right.
Do teachers do that? Do police officers? Do religious leaders?
Right.
All these people in one way or another, I looked at and thought, well, these are leaders. These are people that are supposedly modeling behaviors. And do they do what they tell people they should be doing? Well, in many cases, hey, let me make this clear. In many cases, they certainly do. In the vast majority of cases, those people in positions of authority and leadership and experts do that. But a lot of others don't. And let's face it, you can call them hypocrites. There's a lot of hypocrites out there in those roles. And it's really an issue of accountability between what leaders say and what they do. Right? And when you think about it, it's the same thing. I think what Deodar is saying here. It's a difference between what you say you're going to do and what you recommend other people do, and what you do yourself, right? And if you're not doing that, do you have the moral force of authority to say, you should do this? This makes sense, this will help you, if you're not doing it yourself. That was kind of what I thought about, and I wondered further, is there something about the act of authority or expertise that somehow causes a disconnect between what you tell others to do and what you do yourself? Does it distance you from the moral or ethical or just procedural implications of doing that? Is there something about being an expert that takes you away from that? And
you mean, okay, not so much do leaders get separated, but if you're an expert, if you're a consultant, or somehow you blind to...
Everyone who is in a position where you're basically telling people or trying to instruct or lead, is there something in that process that tends to take you away from the knitting of actually doing it?
Well, yeah, I think that's, I don't know, in kind of my opinion, that's just, it's normal. It's harder for us to see our own blind spots than it is to see somebody else's blind spots. I'm not sure it's even hypocrisy. I think it's just you concentrate outward, and I'm looking at what you're doing. I don't even think to look at my own process.
Or do you get into it because you don't want to look at your own process? This is the other thing. I wonder, the whole thing, physician, teacher, heal yourself, or those that can't teach. Do you get into it because you don't want to face your own? You want to tell people and look outwards rather than looking inwards? I don't know. Again, I don't know that Deodar was even going there or will go there or anything, but that's what I thought of when I read the article. Was this is an interesting conundrum, I think. And I think quality professionals, people that are leaders, experts who profess to tell people how to act and how to improve their organizations, maybe should take a page from their own playbook.
Well, another thing that occurred to me actually is that this kind of brings up a different topic, it really kind of brings up a management topic, which has been around forever, is modeling behavior. And he's not, in a sense, he's kind of talking about that. It's like, well, if I'm going to be a process improvement expert, shouldn't I be modeling that behavior in my own in my own practice. So in a larger way also that applies to any kind of management practice is what kind of manager am I if I'm telling the people I manage to do one thing, but I'm not modeling that same behavior myself in my own tasks in my own job. And I think it almost gets back to that. And I think it's a matter of being a lot more self-aware of what you're doing, and I think that's hard to do. I think it's just hard to stop doing your job, right? To say, okay, I'm not going to do my job for a while. I'm going to think about myself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean,
it runs counter to what you would think it would be. And then Lean has something called leader standard work, which is work that leaders are assigned to do to stay on program and to make sure you're doing what you're modeling that other people should do. So, there's protocols to take care of this, but I don't know that they work all the time. It's an interesting question, I think, and I'm really curious to see the rest of this series, because the first one was really well written and very well presented, and I'm curious to see where he takes it from there.
I believe he's going to be delving into this in a little bit more detail going forward. Well, speaking of management, the medical profession is changing, and we've all seen that. New, for instance, new medical technology, online databases, patient ratings, things like the ability to collect diagnostic information in one part of the country and transmit it to an expert on a particular disease or ailment in another part of the world and get your diagnostic results back. I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff. But what is also changing is the doctors themselves. And we have a new breed of doctors entering practice, and they are the millennials. There's that term again, gives you the shudders. Like baby boomers, but
younger.
And we're talking about those who are, the millennials are those considered those basically 35 years old or less. And they bring with them a set of attitudes and ideas that really are kind of a challenge and a boon to the medical profession. But the challenge part of it is that millennial doctors don't deal with authority in the same way actually as their predecessors. The medical profession has long been a very top-down kind of approach, both when it comes to bringing up new doctors, how new doctors are trained, or in even how doctors deal with non-doctors. It's very hierarchical, very, very top-down kind of command and control. In her article, Lessons from Software Development Can Help Create Dynamic Clinical Practices, Catherine Watts suggests that today's younger docs don't want to follow that top-down model, either in how they are treated or how they work within a clinical environment. So it's a different management style that's going to be needed in those settings. Watts says that you need to create an attitude of inclusiveness, not exclusiveness, which is typically what you think of the old-time doctors, I'm the doctor, you're not. I mean, that's kind of an old style and that's very stereotypical, but that's kind of the thought that's been around for a long time. And part of this inclusiveness might be by borrowing the software industry's agile programming model, one of the hallmarks of which is collaboration between self-organizing cross-functional teams. Where have we heard cross-functional teams? It's a term that's been around for a long time, but now it's kind of working its way perhaps into the medical profession. In that model, a problem is posed to everyone, and everyone has input, no matter where they're from, what department they're from. And this is going to likely, these perspectives are likely going to vary depending on their own perspective of the problem, which in turn is developed by their job. So somebody in maintenance is going to look at a problem differently than the CEO or or an engineer or an assembler. Everybody has their own perspective of a problem, and that's the beauty of a cross-functional team. Is when you bring all these people in from different disciplines, you're going to get different perspectives and perhaps different ideas on how to solve a particular problem. In healthcare, with young doctors, this approach has not really been the norm. In a Modern Medicine article, Jeffrey Bendix writes, quotes, "A characteristic of millennials is a willingness to question authority and establish procedures. Accustomed to constant access to information and not overly concerned with career advancement at the expense of other aspects of life, millennials are less reluctant to ask awkward questions than were their predecessors. And then Bendix then goes on to quote a doctor who says that back in his day, back in my day when I was a doctor, if a resident was on rounds and the attending physician said something, you just get, yes, doctor, nodded your head, and even if you disagreed, you didn't bring it up. You looked it up later. You didn't question the attending physician. Millennials aren't really on board with that. They want to know why a certain decision is made. And Bendix points out that it isn't about questioning authority. It really is about problem solving, is what it is. I mean, the idea of questioning authority is, it's not that I don't appreciate that you're older than me or that you have more experience and maybe even broader skills than I do. But I want to know why you're doing this, because how do you problem solve unless you know the reason a decision is being made? I mean, that's the problem with command and control, is if all you're doing is following instructions and you don't know why you're following those instructions, how do you problem solve in the future?
Yeah, you can't.
You can't. You're not learning anything.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Now, in a clinical setting, I was trying to think what might be an example of how cross-functional teams might work in a clinical setting. And let's say the issue at a particular hospital or clinic is hospital-borne infections. Common problem.
Very common problem,
where patients are getting sick because diseases are passed to them by hospital staff. So you get a cross-functional team together, and maybe it has a doctor, it has a nurse, maybe it has somebody from HR, it has a facilities guy, and they're all going to contribute something. I mean, I was thinking, the facilities guy may say, well, look, what if we put hand cleansing stations? I can install hand cleansing stations outside of every patient room, and maybe a box of gloves and masks. So everything's right there for you. You have something to wash your hands, and you have the hats and the gloves. You got everything you need right outside every station. That comes from the maintenance guy. And the HR person says, and you know what? We could beef up our training. Yeah. We could be doing better training on how to avoid hospital-borne infections and so forth. And the doctor's going to have his clinical input, and the nurse is going to have their input. And you're going to get this disparity of views, which is going to give you a much broader view of how to solve this problem, other than the hospital CEO say, hey, we got a problem here, fix it. And the doctor says, you nurses aren't doing your job, you're not washing your hands, do something about that, right? Well, okay, sure, duh. But you're not really solving the problem. So cross-functional teams in this setting, it's interesting. I like the idea. We're seeing more and more kind of these management ideas that we've talked about forever, working their way into the medical profession. I mean, it's Lean, Six Sigma, cross-functional teams of the Baldrige Award, all this stuff.
That's what I was just going to say to you, was what the story is really about is benchmarking for me. I mean, taking an idea from one area and importing it. I mean, the Baldrige actually is a really good example of that, because 20, 25, 30 years ago, who was winning Baldrige Awards? They were manufacturers.
right.
And now there's no manufacturers winning Baldrige Awards. They're all hospitals, all healthcare facilities. So you see the migration of good ideas. And it goes where it's needed. So I don't think there's any problem with taking some methodology from an agile methodology, some ideas, and transporting it to a clinical setting.
And those young whippersnappers are kind of going to be driving it, looks like.
They know what they're doing.
There you go.
Good stuff. All right. Well, it's still early in the year, so now I think is about a good time as any for our next story, which is talking about something that's really important for professionals in quality or project management or pretty much any other endeavor. And heck, this is a topic that applies to everyone everywhere. Setting and achieving your goals. In her latest article, Are Your Goals Right for You?, regular QD contributor Michelle LaBrosse considers goal setting from the twin perspectives of competency and passion. Really interesting way of looking at this. She offers up a matrix that presents her point beautifully, and I like to show it to you, because I think it, in this case, a picture's worth a zillion words, which I'm going to give you anyway. But you can kind of see from this where she's coming from, and I hope you can see that pretty well.
Oh, sure.
It's a little small maybe, but I'll walk through it with you, and Christopher did a good job of highlighting some of these things. So on the horizontal axis, you see the quality of attention right there, and that really is basically what that's saying is, you're running from bored to engaged. You have people that are bored are at the left-hand side, and those that are fully engaged, enthusiastic, are at the right. Now, running vertically is a scale of your feelings, from discouraged to contented, blissful, right? Now, within the bounds of those axes are three types of goals. In the lower left are mismatch goals that, now you can't read that, I know, but basically what those are goals that are too difficult or don't match your interests or abilities. In the middle are what Michelle calls station of life goals. And those represent the things that you're doing kind of because you have to do them. I mean, you're making money, you're doing a job, you're supporting your family. Basically what you're doing is you're treading water. But a lot of us are in that space. At the upper right is the place instead where you really want to be. And that's what Michelle refers to as your transcendent goals. And those are the ones that are challenging and they're fun and they're worthwhile. They engage the true you in a true and fulfilling sense. And the key here is to do things that push you to your limits. And these aren't things that you want to do for some reason, but they're things that you can do that give you not only financial reward, but pleasure and fulfillment. And it can be hard to kind of strike that balance and truly understand what it is that gives you the greatest sense of fulfillment. I mean, if you think about what she's saying here is there's a lot of ways that we set goals. There's a lot of ways that we spend our time during the course of a business day or just a day or anybody doing anything during the course of the day. And sure, you always have to put up with some of those station of life things because it's just the way it is, right? I mean, unless you're fabulously wealthy. But, you have to do those things. You have to get by. But in terms of setting goals, in terms of reaching for what you want to be and what you want to do, instead what you really want to do is you really want to reach and understand what your transcendent goal is. So to get that is what she's saying. The point of this article is, do you know what your transcendent goal is? Do you know when you're there? Do you know what the feeling is of being in a transcendent goal and starting to work towards that? And again, it's not that easy because it's not just about things that are fun and make you happy. It's about things that many times can make you unhappy or frustrated a little bit because it's so hard. But you're working through it, you're learning stuff, you're challenged, you're engaged in what it is. Again, it's an axis of being engaged, and it's also in terms of how much fun you're having. You want to enjoy it all the time and be engaged, but it's not always going to happen, but you want to be engaged. That's really the key thing here. Well, I thought about this from a personal perspective, as I do most things, just because I'm kind of an egotistical maniac. But, I have always had a goal of writing fiction. Writing has been something that I've always wanted to do, and I've done some of it. I do a lot of writing here at Quality Digest.
You're a salesperson, aren't you?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I like to write, I like to edit, and I actually have two unnamed friends. I'm not going to name either one of them here. The names shall go unnamed. One of them is writing a business book, and one of them is writing a fiction right now. And I've been talking to both these guys over the past couple of weeks and months about this, and talking about the process of writing, and and how hard it is and what you have to do to make it happen, and why you write. And the issue of why you write was one that came up a couple times with both these people in talking with them recently. And it's like, well, for one guy, he's writing a book because he's trying to build his business, he's trying to make some sales. Sure. The other guy has always written, is a creative person in many endeavors, and has a story that he needs to get out. And it's like, you look at that and you're like, oh, wait, well, why? But why do you want to write? Are you motivated to do it every day? The first guy isn't really. I mean, it's kind of like he has to be dragged to it. The other guy does it. I mean, it's a calling, and you need to do it. And for myself, I think about it, it's like, well, as much as I say almost every day, gosh, I really want to write today. I want to tell some stories. I want to do something. I don't do it. And looking at this transcendent goal, as Michelle was putting it, I'm thinking, well, why? Why am I not actually taking steps towards fulfilling that goal? What is it about that goal that's not transcendent for me? Because if it was, I would do it. It would happen. I would make it happen. And I think that's a bit of a key for me when I was reading this, as I was saying, well, the transcendent goals are the things that you are doing in some way. In some way, you're beginning to manifest them. If you're not, if you're just thinking about it, it's potentially a transcendent goal, but it's really not a goal. It's not a goal that you really have set and you're really pursuing. And if you're intimidated by it being hard, and she actually uses the HARD acronym in there, I forget what she meant, but HARD is an acronym she uses, which doesn't really mean hard, it just means challenging, really. Right. Don't be afraid of what's hard. Hard doesn't mean that you can't do it. Hard doesn't mean you have to suffer. Hard just means that it's going to force you to challenge yourself.
Well, I think there's another aspect in here too, why people don't strive for those goals. It's also just it's fear of failure.
Yeah.
Well, if I don't try, well, then it's just because I didn't try. It's not because I tried and failed.
Right.
And a lot of people don't want to try for the fear of, I'm going to try it and then I'm going to fall flat on my face, and that's scary. So I'm not even going to try, even though it's something I really want to do. Mm-hmm. And getting past that block, I think sometimes is as big or bigger a hurdle than the idea of, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to write, and I've got to write every day in order to do this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's hard, but oh man, I'm probably going to suck anyway.
Yeah,
so,
I'm not gonna,
so I'm not even going to go there.
You short-circuit yourself. And
yeah.
procrastinators do the same
Yeah.
thing. You short-circuit yourself by using this excuse that you didn't have enough time to get to it. Well, it's not. It's an excuse.
Yeah.
But again, transcendental goals are the ones that you're going to make happen, or you're going to at least start to manifest them through your actions. And those are the ones you know are the real ones. And you have to embrace those, and you have to not be afraid of success or failure.
Right.
Because these transcendental goals are the ones that are going to make you, you, and make you fully you in your life and your work life. So pursue them. That's the goal.
That's right. You gotta get out there and just step through it.
Just do it.
Just do it. There you go. Before we go, I want to mention that Quality Digest has launched or is rolling out a series of what we're calling knowledge guides. These are just essentially what they are is a compilation of research and definitions and links to particular types of topics that we think people are interested in. I'll just be honest with you, there's probably nothing there that you couldn't find on your own without hours of search.
Right.
But we're bringing it to you in encapsulated form with also links that we think are important to you. We've got 2 out right now. One is on ISO 9001. And the other one is on team problem solving. Right underneath the player page, there's a link out to the knowledge guides. You can link out there. You can read about what's basically what's covered in each of those guides, and you can order them online from our sister company, 360 Performance Circle.
That's right. So check those out. All right. Thanks, Dirk. Well, that's our show. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to be back at you with another big week of Quality Digest Daily starting on Monday. And we'll be back here next Friday with another big Quality Digest Live. So we'll see you then. Have a good weekend, everybody.
So long.
Bye.